The hallway outside the maternity ward smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee. Claire Holloway stood still, her body aching from childbirth, her arms empty for the first time since the nurse had taken her newborn son for routine checks. She wasn't supposed to be standing there. She was supposed to be resting. But instinct had pulled her out of bed and into the quiet corridor. Ryan's voice floated from around the corner. Low, confident, familiar. Claire stopped breathing. "I'm exhausted," he said, chuckling softly. "This whole thing has been a mess. Honestly, I just want to go home. To my real family." The word hit her chest like a blunt object. Real family. Claire leaned against the wall as her fingers curled into the thin cotton of her hospital gown. She waited for him to correct himself, to laugh it off, to say her name, son or their son's name. He didn't. Vanessa's voice answered, light and soothing. "I know. You've done enough. You don't owe anyone anything anymore." Ryan exhaled, relieved. "Exactly. You're the one who understands me." Claire closed her eyes. In that moment, the beeping machines, the hushed footsteps of nurses, the miracle of new life behind her, all of it faded. She saw the last 2 years with terrifying clarity. Quitting her job because Ryan said they didn't need the extra stress, moving to Manhattan for his career, sitting alone through endless nights while he worked late, believing love meant patience. Behind the door, her newborn son stirred and cried. Claire straightened. She didn't scream. She didn't confront him. She didn't beg for an explanation she already had. Instead, she walked back into the room, picked up her phone, and stared at the sleeping bassinet with a calm that scared even her. Something inside her had shut down. Ryan thought she was weak. Vanessa thought she had won. And the world still believed Claire Holloway was just another disposable wife left behind after childbirth. None of them knew this was the last moment she would ever ask for permission to exist, because the next time Ryan saw her, she would be walking away, with his son, and with nothing left to lose. The days after childbirth blurred together in a fog of exhaustion Claire Holloway had never known before. Time no longer moved in hours, but in feedings, diaper changes, and the soft cries of her newborn son, Eli. Morning and night felt the same inside the luxury apartment overlooking Manhattan, where sunlight filtered through tall windows, but warmth never quite reached her. Ryan returned home late every night. When he did, he moved through the apartment like a guest who planned to leave again soon. His suit jackets were tossed over chairs. His phone never left his hand. He spoke in half sentences and avoided eye contact, as if looking at Claire too long might remind him of something inconvenient. "How's the baby?" he asked once, already scrolling through emails. "He hasn't slept," Claire replied quietly. "I haven't either." Ryan nodded, distracted. "You should try to rest. I have an early meeting tomorrow." That was always the end of the conversation. Claire learned not to ask for help. She learned how to hold Eli with one arm while warming a bottle with the other. She learned how to cry silently into a pillow so the baby wouldn't wake. At night, while Ryan slept facing the wall, she stared at the ceiling and wondered when she had become invisible. Visitors came during the first week. Colleagues sent flowers. Vanessa sent a gift basket with a polite note that said, "Congratulations to your family." Claire stared at the card for a long time before throwing it away. Her body was still healing, but no one asked how she felt. The doctor called. The nurse checked in. Ryan didn't notice the tremor in her hands, or the way she flinched when Eli cried too long. He noticed numbers, deadlines, status. One afternoon, Claire tried to log into their shared bank account to order diapers. The password didn't work. She tried again. And again. Access denied. Her chest tightened. She checked the credit card. Declined. When Ryan came home that night, she finally spoke up. The accounts. I can't access them." He didn't look surprised. I reorganized things. It's temporary. You don't need to worry about money right now." "But I said it's handled," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You should focus on the baby." Claire nodded, though something cold settled deep in her stomach. That night, as she rocked Eli near the window, watching the city lights pulse below, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. She wasn't resting. She was being erased. And Ryan was making sure she had nowhere to stand when she finally noticed. Claire began to notice the changes the way one notices a crack in glass. Small at first, easy to dismiss, but impossible to unsee once the light hit it just right. Ryan's habits shifted quietly, without announcement. His phone was always face down now. He took calls in the bathroom, the balcony, the hallway outside their bedroom. So when she entered a room, conversations ended mid-sentence. At first, she told herself it was work. Ryan had always been ambitious. Manhattan had sharpened that ambition into something relentless. She didn't want to be the wife who complained while her husband was building something important. So she swallowed the unease and focused on Eli. But patterns don't lie. Ryan stopped asking where she was during the day. He didn't ask what Eli needed. He didn't even comment when Claire wore the same sweatshirt 3 days in a row, stained faintly with milk and exhaustion. He no longer kissed her goodbye in the mornings. Some days, he didn't say goodbye at all. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Claire found a receipt in Ryan's jacket pocket. An upscale restaurant in Midtown, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. The date was circled in her mind instantly. Last Thursday. He'd told her he was working through dinner. Her hands trembled as she placed the receipt back where she found it. That night, she watched him across the kitchen island as he typed on his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. "How was your meeting?" she asked softly. "Fine," he said without looking up. "With who?" He paused for half a second too long. "Clients." That was all. Later, as she rocked Eli to sleep, Ryan's phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up briefly before dimming. Claire didn't mean to look, but her eyes caught the name. Vanessa. Her heart skipped, then sank. Claire didn't unlock the phone. She didn't read the message. She didn't need to. The truth pressed in from all sides now, heavy and undeniable. The distance, the secrecy. The way Ryan smiled at his screen, but never at her. Still, she stayed quiet, because part of her was afraid of what confirming the truth would cost her. She had no income, no access to money, no family nearby, a newborn who depended on her for everything. So she did what she had learned to do best. She observed. She remembered. She waited. And while Ryan believed she was distracted, fragile, too consumed by motherhood to notice anything else, Claire Holloway was piecing together the reality of her marriage, one silent detail at a time. She just didn't yet know how dangerous that knowledge would become. Claire hadn't planned to go to the charity reception. The invitation had arrived weeks earlier, addressed to Ryan, embossed with gold lettering and a Midtown address she recognized. He told her it was optional. He told her she'd be tired. He told her it would be boring. None of that surprised her. What surprised him was that she showed up. She wore a simple black dress she hadn't touched since before the pregnancy, her body still unfamiliar, her movements careful. Eli stayed home with a night nurse Ryan had hired without asking her. As Claire stepped into the softly lit venue, surrounded by glass walls and low music, she felt out of place and strangely alert at the same time. Ryan spotted her across the room and froze for just a moment. Then he smiled. Not warmly, politely. "You're here," he said, as if she were a distant acquaintance. "I wanted to get out," Claire replied. She didn't mention that she wanted to see his world with open eyes. That was when she noticed the woman standing beside him. Vanessa Moore was smaller than Claire expected, or younger, perfectly composed. Her hair fell effortlessly over one shoulder, and her hand rested lightly on Ryan's arm as if it belonged there. Not possessive, familiar. Vanessa turned and smiled at Claire, her expression open, almost kind. "You must be Claire," she said. "Ryan's told me so much about you." Claire felt something tighten in her chest, but she returned the smile. "Has he?" "Oh, yes," Vanessa replied smoothly. "He says you've been through a lot." Ryan cleared his throat. "Vanessa works with several of our partners." Claire nodded. "That must keep you busy." Vanessa laughed softly. "Busy, but rewarding." They stood there, the three of them, while people passed by, unaware of the quiet collision taking place. Claire watched the way Ryan leaned slightly toward Vanessa when she spoke, the way his shoulders relaxed, the way his eyes softened in a way Claire hadn't seen in months. There was no jealousy, no anger, just a deep, hollow understanding. This wasn't new. Vanessa excused herself moments later, leaving Claire alone with Ryan. "She seems nice," Claire said. Ryan didn't answer right away. "Don't read into things," he said finally. "This is work." Claire nodded again, but as she turned away, she knew the truth with absolute certainty. Vanessa wasn't a threat. She was a replacement already in progress, and Ryan didn't even realize Claire had just crossed a line she would never step back over again. Claire didn't mean to hear it. She was walking down the hallway outside Ryan's home office, Eli asleep against her chest, when she stopped short. Ryan's door was half closed. His voice carried through the narrow gap, unguarded and intimate in a way it hadn't been with her in months. "I can't do this anymore," Ryan said. "Living two lives. Pretending." Claire stood still. Vanessa answered softly, her voice calm, almost reassuring. "Then stop pretending." Ryan laughed under his breath. "I am. That's the point." Claire's fingers tightened around the fabric of Eli's blanket. "The baby changes things," Vanessa said carefully. "No," Ryan replied immediately. "He doesn't. He's just something that happened. You're my real family. You're the life I actually want." The words didn't echo. They didn't explode. They landed quietly, with devastating precision. Claire felt something inside her detach, as if a final thread had been cut cleanly instead of torn. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. Her body went strangely calm, from her mind clearing in a way it hadn't since before the pregnancy. Vanessa spoke again. "What about Claire?" Ryan sighed, irritated. "She'll be fine. She's good at surviving. That's what she does." That was when Claire turned away. She walked back to the nursery and laid Eli gently in his crib. He stirred, then settled, unaware that the world he had been born into had just collapsed and reformed in the span of a sentence. Claire watched his chest rise and fall, steady and trusting, and felt an unfamiliar resolve take root. She didn't confront Ryan that night. She didn't pack bags or make threats or demand explanations. Instead, she opened her laptop and began documenting everything. Dates, conversations, financial changes, patterns she had once dismissed, now aligned with brutal clarity. She realized how much she had seen without understanding, how much she had given without being valued. Ryan came to bed late. He didn't touch her. He didn't notice she was awake. Claire stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, and understood the truth fully for the first time. She was not losing a husband. She was being released from a lie. And tomorrow, she would begin preparing for a life that no longer included asking permission to exist. The morning after, Claire moved through the apartment like nothing had changed. That was what made it dangerous. Ryan noticed the quiet immediately, but he mistook it for weakness, the same way he always had. He assumed she was processing, adjusting, folding herself smaller to survive what he had already decided. Claire fed Eli, washed bottles, folded laundry. She answered Ryan's questions with short, agreeable responses. Yes. No, it's fine. She didn't mention the conversation. She didn't mention Vanessa. She didn't mention the sentence that had severed her from the life she thought she had. Ryan relaxed. He hummed while making coffee. He checked the stock market on his tablet. He spoke about meetings and timelines, and a possible move to a larger place, once things settled down. He said we casually, as if the word still applied. Claire nodded when appropriate. Inside, something else was happening. She began waking before dawn, not from anxiety, but from focus. While Eli slept against her chest, she opened a notebook she hadn't used in years and started writing. Not feelings, facts. Dates when Ryan had stayed out, times when accounts changed, messages she remembered word for word, and she trusted her memory. It had always been sharp. She had just never needed it like this before. She found the old external drive buried in a drawer, the one Ryan had once asked her to keep, just in case. It held archived work files from years ago, back when she had helped him organize reports, clean data sets, spot patterns he'd missed. He had called her brilliant then. He had needed her. Now, he barely saw her. Ryan mistook her calm for acceptance. He even thanked her one night, standing in the doorway. "I appreciate you not making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Claire looked up at him and smiled faintly. He didn't realize that the silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. Vanessa texted him constantly now. Claire saw the notifications light up his phone, watched him tilt the screen away without thinking. It didn't sting anymore. The pain had already done its job. What remained was clarity. That evening, Claire stood by the window with Eli in her arms, the city glowing beneath them. Manhattan looked the same as it always had. Confident, indifferent, full of people certain of their own importance. Ryan believed he was in control. He believed Claire had nowhere to go. What he didn't understand was that the most dangerous moment in any story is not when the woman cries, or begs, or fights. It's when she goes quiet and starts counting. 2 weeks later, Ryan changed tactics. Claire noticed it in the way his tone softened, in the sudden concern that hadn't existed before. He asked if she was sleeping enough. He offered to hold Eli for a few minutes while she showered. He even suggested they take a short walk together, the three of them, like a family playing at being whole. It was almost convincing. But Claire had already learned that kindness from Ryan never came without a purpose. The first official email arrived on a Tuesday morning, marked urgent. It was from a family law firm Claire had never contacted. The subject line made her hands go cold. Custody evaluation notice. Ryan didn't mention it until that evening, when Eli was asleep and the apartment was quiet. He sat across from her at the kitchen island, his posture calm, professional, rehearsed. "I think we should be realistic," he said. "You've been through a lot. Postpartum depression is serious. Courts take that into account." Claire stared at him. "I'm not depressed," she said carefully. Ryan sighed, as if she were missing the point. "You're exhausted, emotional. You don't have income right now. I'm just trying to protect our son." Our son. The phrase felt stolen. He slid a folder across the counter. Inside were printed emails, medical pamphlets, and highlighted notes. Words like instability and adjustment disorder jumped out at her. Claire recognized the tactic immediately. He was building a narrative, one where he was the responsible parent, and she was the risk. "You don't need a lawyer," Ryan added smoothly. "This can stay amicable. But if it goes to court, things get complicated." There it was, the threat, wrapped in reason. Claire closed the folder slowly. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "So this is what you think of me?" Ryan didn't deny it. I think this is what the system will see. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat on the floor beside Eli's crib, her back against the wall, watching his tiny fingers curl and uncurl in his dreams. Fear pressed in from every direction. Ryan had money, influence, attorneys who spoke his language. She had a healing body, a quiet mind, and a child who depended on her. But fear didn't break her. It sharpened her. By morning, Claire had made a decision Ryan never anticipated. She would not defend herself emotionally. She would dismantle him fact by fact. And for the first time since hearing that sentence in the hallway, Claire allowed herself one clear thought, steady and unshakable. If Ryan wanted a war built on truth and control, then she would make sure the truth remembered everything he hoped she had forgotten. Ryan didn't raise his voice when he told her to leave. He didn't need to. He delivered the decision the way he handled everything now. Clean, efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion. It happened on a Friday evening, just after sunset, when Manhattan glowed through the windows as if nothing in the world was wrong. I think some space would be good, he said, standing near the door with his phone in hand. For everyone. Claire was sitting on the couch with Eli asleep against her chest. She looked up slowly. What do you mean by space? Ryan exhaled, already impatient. You should stay somewhere else for a while. I'll cover expenses. It'll look better if you're not overwhelmed here. There it was again. The language. Calm. Reasonable. Damning. This is my home, Claire said quietly. Ryan's expression tightened. Legally, it's mine. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a prepaid card and a printed list of short-term rentals. No apology. No explanation to their son. Just logistics. Now, you can come back for more things later, he added. I don't want this to get ugly. Claire stood slowly, her body aching as she adjusted Eli in her arms. The apartment felt different now, like a hotel room she'd overstayed in. She looked around at the furniture she'd picked, the photos she'd framed, the life she'd organized around Ryan's ambitions. He didn't meet her eyes. She packed only what she could carry. A diaper bag, a small suitcase, Eli's favorite blanket. Ryan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, checking his phone between glances, already elsewhere in his mind. At the door, Claire paused. You're making a mistake. Ryan scoffed softly. You'll thank me later. The elevator ride down felt endless. Claire held Eli close, breathing in his warm, familiar scent, grounding herself as the building descended floor by floor. When the doors opened to the lobby, the doorman glanced at her bags, then away, trained not to see things like this. Outside, the city swallowed her whole. The air was cold. Taxis rushed past. People laughed on the sidewalk. Claire stood there for a moment, unsure where to go, then adjusted her grip and started walking. That night, Claire Holloway disappeared from Ryan's controlled world. He believed he had pushed her out gently. He had no idea he had just given her exactly what she needed: distance, silence, and proof. And while he slept in the apartment he claimed as his own, Claire walked into the unknown with her son, carrying nothing but resolve. She would never walk back the same woman. By Monday morning, Ryan realized something was wrong. Claire hadn't called. She hadn't texted. She hadn't asked for money or complained, or demanded to come back for more things. The prepaid card he'd given her hadn't been used. The short-term rental contacts hadn't been opened. For a woman he believed incapable of functioning without him, her silence was unsettling. He checked the apartment cameras. Nothing. He called the night nurse. She left calmly, the woman said. Didn't seem confused, just tired. That wasn't the answer he wanted. Ryan drove past two of the addresses he'd suggested, half expecting to see Claire struggling with a stroller on the sidewalk, ready to accept help. She wasn't there. He told himself she was being dramatic. that she'd cool off, that she'd return once reality set in. But by the third day, irritation curdled into concern. Emails went unanswered. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The joint cloud account showed no activity. Claire Holloway had vanished as cleanly as if she'd been erased. And for the first time, Ryan felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Loss of control. He contacted his attorney. "She's withholding the child," he said sharply. The attorney hesitated. "Has she contacted you at all?" "No." "Then we should be careful," the man replied. "Disappearance isn't the same as negligence." Ryan slammed his phone down. Meanwhile, Claire sat in a quiet coastal town hours away, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond a small rental house she'd found under her own name. The place was modest, clean, anonymous. Eli slept in a borrowed crib by the window, the sound of waves replacing the sirens and traffic he'd been born into. For the first time since giving birth, Claire slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. She didn't post. She didn't update anyone. She used cash, burner emails, and an old laptop she'd never synced to Ryan's world. Each morning, she walked with Eli along the shoreline, her mind slowly clearing, her breathing steadying. She wasn't hiding. She was resetting. On the 4th day, Ryan finally received a message. Not from Claire, from a compliance officer at his firm requesting a meeting. The subject line was neutral, routine. But something about the timing made Ryan's stomach drop. Claire, meanwhile, closed her laptop after sending a single, carefully worded email of her own to a man named Brigadier. She stared at the ocean, Eli warm against her chest, and allowed herself one small, dangerous smile. Ryan thought disappearance meant weakness. He was about to learn it meant strategy. Ryan sat at the long glass table on the 42nd floor, where fingers steepled, jaw tight. The conference room overlooked Manhattan, a view he usually enjoyed. Today, the skyline felt like an audience waiting for him to fail. Across from him sat 2 people he hadn't expected to see together, the firm's compliance director and an outside legal consultant. "This is standard," the compliance director said calmly. "Just a review." Ryan nodded, though his pulse thudded in his ears. "Of course, happy to cooperate." They began with routine questions, past transactions, archived reports, old partnerships. Ryan answered smoothly. He had always been good at this, controlled, polished, untouchable. Then the consultant slid a folder across the table. "Do you recognize these files?" he asked. Ryan glanced down and froze. The formatting was unmistakable. The color-coded notes, the margin comments, the structure he had once relied on heavily years ago when he was still climbing. Work he hadn't personally touched in a long time. "That's internal data," Ryan said carefully, "from years back." "Yes," the consultant replied. "Prepared by an external analyst under your supervision." Ryan's mouth went dry. "How did you obtain this?" he demanded. The compliance director folded her hands. "We received an inquiry, a request for clarification. Certain discrepancies were flagged." Ryan's mind raced. The only person who had ever organized those data sets with that level of precision was Claire. Back in the coastal town, Claire closed her phone after reading Marcus Reed's brief reply. "I see what you see. We need to talk. You were right to reach out." She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply exhaled, the weight in her chest easing slightly. This wasn't revenge. It was balance. In the boardroom, the consultant continued. "There are gaps here, decisions that benefited certain partners disproportionately. Nothing criminal on its own, but combined, it raises questions." Ryan leaned back, forcing composure. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No," the compliance director said. "We're asking you to explain." For the first time in years, Ryan didn't have a ready answer. That evening, he returned to the apartment alone. The silence felt heavier than before. Claire's absence was no longer an inconvenience. It was a variable he couldn't control. He stared out at the city lights, realization settling in slowly and painfully. Claire hadn't disappeared to punish him. She had stepped out of his shadow. And now, from a distance, he couldn't reach. And she was reminding the world, and him, that she had never been powerless. She had just been patient. Claire met Marcus Reed 3 days later in a quiet cafe overlooking the harbor. The place was small, unremarkable, chosen precisely because no one important ever looked twice at it. She arrived early, Eli tucked against her chest in a sling, her posture calm but alert. This meeting mattered more than she let herself feel. Marcus recognized her instantly. "Claire Holloway," he said, standing as she approached. "You look stronger than I remember." She allowed a faint smile. I had to be. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 8 years. Back then, they'd worked late nights on a consulting project Ryan had taken credit for, long before his rise. Marcus had noticed Claire's talent, even when Ryan hadn't wanted others to. He'd remembered her precision, her memory, her integrity. "You didn't disappear by accident," Marcus said once they were seated. "You planned this." Claire nodded. "I needed time, and distance, and someone who wouldn't underestimate me." Marcus glanced at Eli, sleeping peacefully. "You're not here to destroy him." "No," Claire replied. "I'm here to protect my son, and myself." She slid a flash drive across the table. Marcus didn't touch it immediately. "Do you know what this means?" "I do," she said evenly. "That's why I waited." The files weren't explosive on their own. Claire knew that. But combined with Ryan's current position, with the timing of his internal review, they formed a pattern. Not illegal, but questionable enough to erode trust, enough to slow him down, enough to make the system look closer. Marcus finally took the drive. This gives you leverage," he said. "Not victory." "That's all I want," Claire answered. "Room to stand." They spoke for over an hour, about custody law, about financial exposure, about how people like Ryan collapsed, not from one blow, but from pressure applied steadily and quietly. Marcus was honest with her. This would take time, discipline, silence. Claire agreed to everything. When they stood to leave, Marcus hesitated. "Why now?" he asked gently. "Why not earlier?" Claire looked down at Eli, then back at him. "Because now, I'm no longer afraid of what happens if I lose him." Marcus understood. As Claire walked back toward the shoreline, the wind cool against her face, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not hope, stability. Ryan had spent years believing Claire was only useful when she supported him. Now, unsupported by truth and timing, she was becoming something far more dangerous. A woman who no longer needed permission. And this time, she wasn't walking alone. The first formal custody hearing was scheduled quietly, without media or spectacle. Ryan expected that. He believed discretion was his ally. He arrived confident, flanked by attorneys who spoke in calm, assured tones. To them, this case was simple. A financially unstable mother, recently postpartum, versus a powerful, established father. Claire arrived alone. She wore a neutral coat, no makeup, no jewelry. Eli resting peacefully in his carrier. She didn't look defiant. She didn't look broken. She looked prepared. Ryan noticed immediately and felt an unexpected flicker of irritation. This wasn't how she was supposed to look. When proceedings began, Ryan's legal team laid out their case methodically. They referenced emotional stress, lack of income, temporary housing. They framed concern as protection, responsibility as control. Claire listened without interruption. Then it was her turn. Her attorney stood, calm and precise. He didn't begin with emotion. He began with records, financial timelines, employment history, documentation showing Claire's contributions to Ryan's early career, work he had quietly benefited from, strategies she had shaped, analyses she had corrected. The room shifted subtly. This wasn't in Ryan's narrative. The attorney continued. My client did not abandon stability. She was removed from it. She did not disappear. She acted to protect her child from an environment of manipulation and coercive control. Ryan stiffened. Then came the moment he never anticipated. So the attorney referenced the internal review currently underway at Ryan's firm. Not accusations, but context. Given the uncertainty of Mr. Holloway's professional standing at present, granting sole custody would expose the child to unnecessary instability. Ryan's head snapped up. Claire met his eyes for the first time. There was no anger there, no triumph, only certainty. He finally understood. She hadn't come to fight him emotionally. She had come armed with his blind spots. The judge asked questions. Claire answered clearly. About routines, about feeding schedules, about support systems, about plans. Her voice didn't shake. Ryan struggled when asked similar questions. He knew numbers, not nap times. When the hearing adjourned, no ruling was made. But something irreversible had happened. The balance had shifted. Outside the courtroom, Ryan approached her. You planned this, he said quietly. Claire adjusted Eli's blanket. I planned to survive. As she walked away, Ryan stood frozen, realizing too late that the woman he dismissed had been watching, learning, and remembering everything. And now, the truth he never knew she held was finally standing between him and control. Vanessa Moore had always trusted her timing. She knew when to lean in, when to step back, and when to let men believe they were in control while she quietly positioned herself for the next move. That instinct had never failed her, until Ryan Holloway stopped answering her messages the way he used to. At first it was subtle, delayed replies, short responses, canceled dinners blamed on work chaos. Ryan still saw her, but his attention fractured, his mind elsewhere. He checked his phone constantly now, not for her, but for emails from lawyers, partners, people whose opinions suddenly mattered more than hers. Vanessa noticed everything. She heard whispers at events before Ryan did, the polite smiles that lingered a second too long, the conversations that stopped when he approached. His name was being mentioned carefully, cautiously, as if surrounded by invisible parentheses. One night, after a charity dinner, where no one asked Ryan about his next promotion, Vanessa finally pressed him. "What's going on?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "You've been distant." Ryan exhaled sharply. "It's nothing." That answer used to be enough. It wasn't now. Vanessa had built her life on reading risk, and Ryan was suddenly full of it. Legal issues, custody battles, internal reviews. Men like him were valuable only when they were untouchable. The moment doubt entered the room, women like Vanessa recalculated. She began making quiet calls of her own, discreet questions, hypothetical scenarios. What would happen if Ryan lost leverage, if his public image fractured, if his finances tightened under scrutiny? The answers came back slower, colder than she liked. Then came the invitation. A private meeting. Not from Ryan, but from someone adjacent to his professional circle. A warning masked as concern. "You might want to step carefully," the woman said over coffee. "This situation isn't resolving quickly." Vanessa smiled, thanked her, and walked away, already planning her exit. She stopped leaving things at Ryan's apartment, stopped answering certain messages, began mentioning opportunities in other cities, other circles, on other futures. Ryan noticed too late. The night he reached for her reassurance, she was already emotionally gone. "I can't be pulled into something messy," she told him gently. "I need stability." The word hit him harder than any accusation. Stability was what Claire had asked for. Vanessa left without drama, without confrontation, without loyalty. Just distance. Just absence. And for the first time, Ryan understood what it felt like to be abandoned, not because he was cruel, but because he was no longer useful. Across the state, Claire walked along the shoreline with Eli, unaware of the exact moment Vanessa began to disappear. She didn't need to know. The truth had its own momentum now, and it was finally moving without her having to push. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It crept in through small, undeniable changes that Ryan couldn't argue away. Meetings were postponed. Invitations stopped coming. His name appeared less frequently in internal emails, replaced by phrases like pending review and interim decisions. The confidence he once carried like armor began to fracture under the weight of uncertainty. At the firm, people watched him carefully now. Colleagues who used to linger at his office door suddenly had somewhere else to be. Junior associates stopped asking for his input. Even his assistant began scheduling meetings with an apologetic tone, as if preparing him for disappointment before it arrived. Ryan told himself this was temporary. But doubt has a way of spreading. During the second custody session, the atmosphere shifted further. This time, the judge asked fewer questions of Claire and more of Ryan. Detailed ones. About his schedule, his travel, his availability, his support system. The answers that once impressed boardrooms now sounded hollow in a room focused on a child's needs. Ryan felt it then, a subtle but unmistakable loss of authority. Outside the courtroom, he called his attorney. "Why does it feel like we're losing ground?" The man hesitated. "Because control isn't the same as credibility," he said carefully. "And right now, she has more of it." That night, Ryan returned to the apartment and noticed something else missing. Silence. Vanessa hadn't called. Her belongings were gone. The closet space she'd quietly claimed over months stood empty, like she had never been there at all. Ryan stood in the doorway longer than necessary, anger flaring, then fading into something colder. He poured a drink he didn't finish. Across the state, Claire sat at a small kitchen table while Eli slept nearby. Papers were spread neatly in front of her. Not weapons, not threats, just preparation. She moved steadily, checking details, responding to emails, building a future piece by piece. There was no rush, no panic. For the first time, she wasn't reacting. She was directing. Ryan, meanwhile, lay awake staring at the ceiling, the city no longer comforting. He replayed conversations, searching for the moment he lost control. The realization came slowly, bitter and undeniable. It wasn't when Claire left. It was when he underestimated her silence. By morning, the truth was clear to everyone involved. The narrative Ryan built was collapsing under its own weight. And the more he struggled to hold it together, the more obvious it became that the cracks he tried to hide were already wide enough for the truth to walk straight through. The third court appearance felt different before anyone spoke. Ryan sensed it the moment he entered the room. The air was quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves had learned his story and adjusted their expectations. He sat beside his attorney, posture straight, face composed, but something inside him had already begun to slip. Claire arrived moments later. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The judge opened with procedural remarks, then turned directly to Ryan. "Mr. Holloway, we need clarification regarding recent changes in your employment status." Ryan's attorney shifted. "My client remains employed," he said carefully. "However, there is an internal review underway." "How long has that review been active?" the judge asked. Ryan answered before his lawyer could stop him. "Several weeks. And you didn't disclose this at the previous hearing?" Ryan hesitated. That pause lasted less than a second, but it echoed louder than any confession. The judge made a note. Claire's attorney didn't press. He didn't need to. Instead, He introduced updated documentation, emails confirming Ryan's reduced authority, a revised travel schedule showing increased uncertainty, and sworn statements regarding Claire's stable living arrangement and support system. Ryan watched it unfold, stunned by how little drama it required. No accusations, no raised voices, just facts. When it was Claire's turn to speak, she stood calmly. She described her days with Eli, feeding times, pediatric visits, the long walks by the water. She didn't frame herself as a victim. She didn't mention betrayal. She spoke only of consistency and care. The contrast was devastating. Ryan tried to reclaim control when his turn returned. "I can provide financially," he said. "I always have." The judge looked at him evenly. "This court is not evaluating your income alone. We're evaluating reliability." That word settled heavily in Ryan's chest. By the time the session ended, the outcome was clear even without a ruling. The court had shifted its center of gravity, and Ryan was no longer standing on solid ground. Outside, his attorney pulled him aside. "You need to prepare for limited custody," he said quietly. "And you need to stop underestimating her." Ryan didn't respond. Across the parking lot, Claire buckled Eli into his car seat, her movements steady. She didn't smile. She didn't look relieved. But for the first time, she felt something unmistakable. The ground beneath her feet wasn't moving anymore. And the man who once decided her worth was finally discovering how quickly power disappears when the truth no longer supports it. Ryan's unraveling didn't come with headlines or public disgrace. It came quietly, the way real consequences often do. One phone call replaced another. Meetings turned into emails. Emails turned into silence. By the end of the week, his access badge no longer opened the executive floor without delay. He told himself it was temporary. But temporary things don't come with non-disclosure reminders and carefully worded warnings from human resources. At home, the apartment felt hollow. Vanessa was gone for good now. Not even a note. Just empty shelves and the lingering scent of a perfume that no longer mattered. Ryan moved through the rooms aimlessly, realizing too late how much noise he'd filled his life with to avoid being alone with himself. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. "Given the ongoing review," the managing partner said evenly, "we're placing you on extended leave. This isn't punitive, it's precautionary." Ryan gripped the edge of the counter. "So I'm suspended?" The man hesitated. "I'd say, paused. Paused." The word burned. That evening, Ryan poured himself a drink and stared out at the skyline he once believed belonged to him. His phone buzzed, not with reassurance, but with a notification from his attorney. Temporary custody ruling issued. He opened it with shaking hands. Primary physical custody. Claire Holloway. Visitation. Supervised. Our pending review. Ryan sank onto the couch. Across the state, Claire received the same message while warming a bottle. She read it once, then set the phone down and focused on Eli, who gurgled softly, unaware that a line had just been crossed that would never be uncrossed. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She simply felt steady. Ryan tried calling her that night, straight to voicemail. He tried again the next morning, and again. Each unanswered call chipped away at the illusion that he still had a say in her life. For the first time, Ryan understood the full weight of what he had done. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost authority, access, and the story he told himself about who he was. Meanwhile, Claire folded laundry in the sunlight of her small kitchen, Eli asleep nearby. The world hadn't suddenly become easy, but it had become honest. And honesty, she was learning, was far more powerful than control ever had been. Ryan's fall wasn't dramatic. It was final. And there would be no one left to catch him. The final custody ruling arrived on a quiet morning, without ceremony. No dramatic phone call. No courtroom confrontation. just a notification on Claire's phone while she was sitting at the kitchen table. Eli balanced on her hip, sunlight spilling across the floor. She read it once, then again. Primary physical and legal custody granted to Claire Holloway. All decisions regarding healthcare, residence, and education entrusted to the mother. Visitation for Ryan Holloway limited and supervised, subject to future review. Claire exhaled slowly. Her hands didn't shake. Her knees didn't buckle. The moment felt almost unreal in its calmness, as if her body had already known the outcome long before the words appeared on the screen. She looked down at Eli. He blinked up at her, dark eyes curious, completely unaware that the world had just decided where he belonged. Claire pressed her forehead gently against his, a quiet promise passing between them. "You're safe," she whispered. Across the city, Ryan received the ruling alone in his apartment. He read it standing, then sank into a chair as the weight of it settled in. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a delay. It was a conclusion. He tried to call his attorney. Voicemail. He tried to call Claire. Nothing. For the first time, there was no angle left to play, no leverage to pull. The system he had trusted to protect his control had spoken clearly, and not in his favor. Ryan stared at the words, supervised visitation longer than anything else. He had become a risk. Claire spent the rest of the day doing ordinary things. She washed bottles. She answered emails from Marcus with brief, professional replies. She took Eli for a walk along the shoreline, the wind cool and steady against her face. People passed her without knowing what she had survived. That evening, she sat in the quiet living room, Eli asleep in his crib nearby, and allowed herself one moment of acknowledgement. She had not won by destroying anyone. She had won by enduring. Ryan, meanwhile, sat in silence, surrounded by the ruins of a life he thought he owned. He finally understood the cost of calling someone else his real family, because the child he tried to control had been placed beyond his reach, and the woman he dismissed had just been trusted with everything that truly mattered. For Claire, the battle was over. What came next would be something entirely different. A life built not on fear, but on choice. The consequences didn't arrive with noise. They arrived with distance. Ryan's name no longer opened doors the way it once had. Former colleagues responded with politeness instead of urgency. Invitations stopped coming. Projects moved forward without him. His extended leave quietly became indefinite. His role reduced to a footnote in meetings he no longer attended. People didn't accuse him. They adjusted around him. That adjustment hurt more than confrontation ever could. At a small cafe near his apartment, Ryan overheard two junior analysts talking at the next table. They mentioned the firm's recent restructuring, the importance of stability, the need for leaders who didn't bring personal chaos into professional spaces. Neither of them looked at him. Neither of them needed to. He paid and left without finishing his coffee. The apartment felt smaller now, empty in ways that couldn't be fixed by replacing furniture or changing views. The silence wasn't peaceful. It echoed. Ryan scrolled through his phone, habitually opening messages that never came. Vanessa was gone. Claire was unreachable. The child he'd spoken of so carelessly existed only in scheduled, supervised windows that felt more like reminders than relationships. One afternoon, during a supervised visit, Ryan watched Eli from across the room while a neutral observer took notes. His son reached instinctively toward Claire when he became fussy, calming the moment she spoke. Ryan felt a sharp, unexpected grief, not just for what he'd lost, but for what he'd misunderstood. Claire wasn't keeping the child from him. The child simply knew where safety lived. Later that evening, Ryan sat alone and replayed the sentence that had started it all. My real family. The words sounded hollow now, stripped of the power he thought they carried. He understood, finally, that family was not a title he could assign. It was a bond earned through presence, patience, and protection. Across the state, Claire packed boxes in her small home, preparing for a move she had chosen herself. A new job offer sat printed on the counter. Nothing flashy, just solid, respectful, built on trust. Eli babbled on the floor, surrounded by light and quiet. Claire didn't think about Ryan often anymore. When she did, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. Ryan had lost the story he used to justify himself, the power to define others, the privilege of being believed without question. The punishment wasn't dramatic. It was fitting. He got exactly what he had given: distance, indifference, and the slow understanding that some losses are permanent. And this time, no one was coming to save him from the consequences of his own choices. Claire didn't feel victorious in the way movies promised. There was no rush of adrenaline, no moment where the past collapsed in flames behind her. What she felt instead was quiet. A deep, steady quiet that settled into her bones and stayed. Life moved forward in small, deliberate steps. She accepted the job offer after one final conversation with Marcus, who reminded her to read every clause carefully, to protect her time the way she now protected her peace. The work was familiar, analytical, grounded. It didn't ask her to perform strength. It respected it. Claire set up her laptop on a modest desk near the window, Eli playing at her feet, the rhythm of her days finally her own. Ryan reached out once more. The message was short, careful, almost humble. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to talk sometime about Eli. Claire read it without reaction. She didn't delete it. She didn't reply. She saved it in a folder labeled Later, not out of cruelty, but because she understood something she hadn't before. Not every door needs to be reopened just because someone knocks politely. Instead, she focused on what was real. Morning walks, steady work, Eli's laugh when she kissed his neck, evenings filled with books and soft music instead of tension and waiting. The life she was building wasn't dramatic, it was durable. One afternoon, at a small community gathering near the harbor, Claire found herself talking with a man she'd seen a few times before. His name was Thomas. He worked nearby. He listened more than he spoke. When Eli fussed, Thomas waited without impatience, as if he understood that some moments simply belonged to mother and child. There was no spark. There was comfort. Claire noticed that too. She didn't rush anything. She didn't promise herself a future shaped around another person. She allowed connection to exist without expectation, something she had never done before. For the first time, companionship felt optional, not necessary for survival. That night, after Eli fell asleep, Claire sat by the window and thought about the woman she used to be, the one who waited for approval, the one who believed endurance was the same as love. She felt no anger toward her past self, only gratitude. Ryan, somewhere across the city, continued learning how silence feels when it no longer serves as a threat. He was adjusting to a life without shortcuts, without women who stayed to make him feel important. Claire didn't wish him harm. She wished herself freedom. And as she turned off the light and went to bed, she knew with absolute certainty that the greatest revenge she could ever take was already complete. She had chosen herself, and she had never felt more at peace. The first real sign that everything had changed came on an ordinary morning. Claire stood in the kitchen of her new home, sunlight pouring through wide windows as Eli sat in his high chair, banging a spoon against the tray with pure, unfiltered joy. The sound filled the room. Not noise, but life. The kind that didn't ask permission or apologize for existing. This place wasn't grand. It wasn't a symbol of revenge or victory. It was simply hers. Her days had settled into a rhythm that felt honest. Work she enjoyed, evenings she controlled, a future that unfolded slowly, without fear rushing it forward. Claire no longer woke up bracing for disappointment. She woke up planning. Ryan became a distant figure, defined by schedules and boundaries set by others. Supervised visits, polite emails routed through attorneys. He followed the rules now, not because he suddenly understood them, but because he had no choice. Power had left his hands the moment he stopped respecting the people who mattered. Claire didn't watch his decline. She didn't need to. Her reward came in quieter forms. Eli's steady laughter, his instinctive reach for her when he felt unsure, the certainty in his small world that he was safe, protected, loved without condition. That was the inheritance she fought for. And then, without drama, something else grew. Thomas didn't arrive as a rescuer or a promise. He arrived as presence. Over time, shared walks, shared silences. A man who never questioned her strength or felt threatened by it. A man who understood that love built slowly tends to last. Claire didn't rush the word forever, but she didn't fear it anymore. On a cool evening near the water, as Eli slept in his stroller, Thomas reached for her hand, not possessively, not urgently, just there. Claire let herself lean into that moment, aware of how far she had come. This wasn't the life she planned years ago. It was better. Ryan, somewhere across the city, continued learning what it meant to live with consequences. He had his career altered, his reputation adjusted, and a son who would one day understand exactly who showed up and who didn't. Claire didn't need him to suffer. Justice had already done its work. She walked forward carrying what mattered, her child, her dignity, and a future shaped by choice, not survival. The woman who once stood in a hospital hallway listening to her life collapse was gone. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, someone free. And this time, she wasn't walking away. She was walking home. So the story comes to a close here. And if you're still with us at this moment, I want to pause for a second and speak to you directly. Because if you're still here, something in this journey probably touched your heart in a quiet but real way. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in Claire. Maybe you recognized a moment where you stayed too long, hoped too hard, or waited for someone else to choose you. What this story reminds us is simple, but not easy. We cannot control how others treat us, but we can always choose how we respond. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Claire didn't win because she shouted louder or hurt someone back. She won because she reclaimed her mind, her dignity, and her ability to choose. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like building a calm life after chaos. And that kind of healing is real. If this story resonated with you, if it made you reflect on your own life even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, not just entertain. Thank you for staying until the end. You matter more than you think. This story is a work of fiction created for storytelling and emotional reflection purposes only. While the events, characters, and situations may feel realistic and closely connected to real life, they are not based on any specific real individuals or actual legal cases. Any resemblance to real people, living or deceased, or real events is purely coincidental. The narrative is designed to explore themes of family, personal growth, accountability, and emotional healing through a dramatic lens, not to present factual claims or legal advice. Viewers should understand that custody decisions, legal outcomes, and personal circumstances vary greatly in real life and depend on individual laws and situations. This content is intended to inspire reflection, empathy, and discussion, not to misrepresent reality. Thank you for watching with an open heart and understanding, and for engaging with this story as a piece of creative storytelling rather than a factual account.